order, being as how we have at least one clock at 6 o'clock, saying the Wednesday, August 17th meeting of the City of Santa Barbara Airport Commission is called to order, and we'll start with roll call.
Thank you. Jim Wilson,
Here.
Kirk Martin, Karen Kahn,
Here.
Dolores Johnson,
Here.
Craig R. Curry, Bruce Miller, Carl Hopkins.
Here. Changes to the agenda?
No changes,
No
Mr.
changes.
Chair.
Public comment. Do we have any public comment slips?
I don't have any slips, no.
Okay, any member of the public may address the Airport Commission on any subject within the jurisdiction of the commission that is not scheduled before an item on that same day. We have no public comments. Consent calendar. We have the minutes, recommendation that the Airport Commission waive the reading and approve the minutes of the special meeting of July 20th, and the property that we accept the property management report for July. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
The item is passed. Notices on Thursday, August 11th, because they were closed on Friday at 5 p.m. The Airport Commission Secretary duly posted this agenda on the bulletin board. And I don't see either of our liaisons here. So we will not have a liaison report from either City of Santa Barbara or Goleta. So the next item is Airport Master Plan Draft Environmental Impact. Recommendation that the airport discuss the Master Plan Draft EIR Cultural Resource section and submit written comments in regards to its findings. I asked that this item be put on the agenda, so I think it would be appropriate for me to explain why and see if we have any discussion and possibly any comments from the public. I have been involved in the master plan since its very beginning, and the master plan is not a blueprint of absolutely every step that will be taken. It's not an architectural blueprint that says this is going to be done at this date and this time, etc. It is an overall guideline, and the principal guidelines of that were south of runway 725 was commercial, and this corner that is east of runway 15 and north of 25 would be the heavy general aviation, principally the jets and the turbines and the fixed base operators. There would be two of. On the northwest end, that is west of 115 and north of 257, would be the light general aviation, city controlled, city owned. That is the overall plan for this, with the idea of the flight schools being there, light GA transient parking, possible expansion of city-owned tie downs, some additional city-owned hangars. All of these are based also, the entire plan, on demand. If there is no demand, then we're not going to build it. If there is demand, then we will proceed at that time. It's also based on money, obviously. There isn't money to do everything today. It is a 20-year plan. So the plan was done, and as part of the plan, the 25 people on the plan, which included just about everybody from the airport, as well as a variety of people from the cities of Goleta and Santa Barbara, put into the master plan that the World War II hangars 1, 2, and 3, those are the 3 hangars along this side of the field, excluding the signature hangar, excluding the one over there by Atlantic. Those 3 would be torn down, actually all 5 of them. When the EIR was done, the consultant group that was hired to examine the historical cultural resources section of the EIR determined that hangars 1, 2, and 3, again the coastal aviation and then the 2 further over, that those 3 hangars were possibly eligible as city structures of merit. A city structure of merit is something that the city of Santa Barbara has. As an aside, the city of Goleta and many other cities don't have that designation, but Santa Barbara does. There are 4 possible levels of historic value, and this is number 4. That is the bottom. The top is the National Historical Register. The 2 hangars referred to as the Boneyard, way back down here in the corner, those were deemed eligible as National Historic. And the EIR recommends their preserving. The EIR, though, recommends preserving all three, hangars 1, 2, and 3. At the meeting a month ago, I spoke out saying I disagreed with that. The idea of retaining one of those three I thought was fine, but not all three. And the principal reason was that I believe that hangar 1 will need to be removed in order to meet the demand for the transient parking, flight schools, et cetera. That was why we decided in the committee to remove it, and that's why I believe it will need to be removed. Hangar number 2 was removed to gain access to the 30 T hangars that were proposed and planned, I guess I'd say northwest of the existing Tower T hangars. If we don't build those hangars, once the FBOs have moved from the south end to the north end, we will probably have almost certainly have fewer T hangars than we do today. And there is a waiting list for T hangars, so a overall waiting list. So I believe that those T hangars need to be built, and in order to gain access to them, FAA standardized access will have to remove hangar 2. Now, one of the ways of accomplishing this, I guess, would be to stop the EIR process, go through and do an update on it, resubmit it for a 45-day period, and proceed in that manner. Another way, and I think a better way, is to go ahead and approve or proceed with the EIR. It'll be going September 1st to the Planning Commission. It'll either then or shortly after that hopefully be certified. The master plan will then be updated. It will say that we're going to save these hangars. It will then go on to be approved. And I believe that a year, 2, 3, 4 years from now, when the money and the demand is there, we're going to come back and say, you know what, we got to remove hangar 1 for the transient parking, or we got to remove hangar 2 because that's the only way we can get access to the T hangars. If I were on the Planning Commission, or if I were on the City Council, and nobody had said anything, and they approved the master plan that says they're all going to be kept, and then all of a sudden we come up and say, no, we want to remove them, I'd be a little upset. I think it is appropriate for this commission to take, to approve this document that I'll read here in a moment, and for me to go to the Planning Commission and explain what we're doing, and go to the City Council and explain what we're doing, and then if or when, depending on your perspective, we need to remove them, we'll go through the process of what I'd refer to as a mini EIR based on the primary one with these changes, and give the explanation for why these hangars need to be removed, hangar or hangars, and either get permission or not get permission. But there's no need to do that today when we don't know for sure that we're ever going to remove them. But since the original plan called for it, and I've done a whole lot of studying on it, and I'm convinced that at least one, if not both, will have to be removed, I think that is an appropriate action for this commission. So I have written up and I've distributed to the commission members and to Ms. Johns a statement here that I'll go ahead and read and then open it up for discussion. It is a position of the Airport Commission that it is unnecessary to retain World War II hangars 1, 2, and 3, buildings 267, 309, and 317 as city structures of merit. We concur with the proposal to retain hangar 3 as a potential city structure of merit. However, the removal of hangar 1 is likely to be needed in order to provide adequate ramp space for light general aviation as proposed in the master plan. This includes space for flight school planes, transient aircraft, and possible additional city tie-downs. The removal of hangar 2 is likely to be needed in order to provide adequate FAA-approved access to the planned additional T hangars, which will replace hangars on the south side of the airfield being removed for commercial operations. This statement is being placed into the public so as to provide timely notice to the Planning Commission and City Council of the likely future need to remove these structures that are potential city structures of merit. I would like
Yeah.
comments.
I have a lot of comments. I'd like some questions. First, I apologize that I haven't been around, and I'd like an opportunity to spend time with you and look at this. But I don't know how it's going to impact the future of the FBOs, because I know that right now there's quite a bit of revenue that Signature is getting. I don't even know what that number is, by the use of these hangars, and how is it going to impact? How do you see that impacting the FBOs that come into the master plan once it gets approved?
Once the master plan's approved, there's no changes to the structures that are there at the end of the lease term of the FBOs. And we do another RFP for or RFQ, whichever it turns out to be, for the FBOs. Then that will be taken into consideration at that time.
Okay. So is it going to be the requirement of the FBOs then to build hangars if we're going to take some of these down, or is it only as needed as we move forward?
Well, as Commissioner Hopkins mentioned, the master plan is a demand based master plan. If we don't have the demand, then there's no reason to actually construct. So as to the proposals that we might get from the FBOs from the RFQ process, we're going to be requesting a development plan. So at this point, I have no clue what they're going to submit. I would assume there would be some new structures, but there are some old structures on the field that are still well used and can be maintained.
I'd hate to see them go just because. But so it's the intention. I want to make sure that we're just making it available if the time comes that we have to make a decision
Right.
based upon whatever is going on that we.
Right, but I
Okay.
would note that the master plan calls for the FBOs to have 23
acres.
23 acres lots on this side,
Correct.
and that everything east or west of 1-5 would revert to the airport. So
Okay.
if the airport wanted to, they would lease out space in those hangars, not the FBOs. The FBOs would own nothing
Got it.
west of 1-5, north
Okay.
of 2-5.
All right. Now I understand it.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
I'd like to say that I think that the fact that we're losing all of the hangar space on the south side, because the south side will become airline terminal property and probably a parking lot, hoping we have enough business to do that. I think, you know, in order to maintain general aviation at its current and hopefully a higher level, you want to have some facilities for them. And when you start taking away parking or hangar, you start shrinking your general aviation component and saying to the public it doesn't matter. So I'm in favor of having this on record so that we recognize that when the appropriate time comes and when there's a need to replace those hangars with things that make the airport money and provide GA and promote GA, that it's appropriate to do so. And that we have foreseen that and recognize that we aren't insisting that they tear them down now and we sit and wait for 10 years until somebody needs the space, but instead have said, with a look toward the future, we think that this will be a wise course of action when it's necessary.
Okay.
Yeah, it would seem to me that our forward actions need to be based on the growth of the airport's requirements. It's not clear to me what legal status of a potential city structures of merit really has. I mean, what is a potential structure of merit? And what is the city's claim on it if the airport needs this space for increased operations?
We do have with us tonight staff from Community Development, and Nicole, if you'd introduce yourself and respond.
Is this the right space?
That
Uh,
should be.
I'm Nicole Hernandez. I'm the urban historian for the city, and I can answer the question on the potentials list. The potentials list is made with all the buildings on there. There's every intent to designate them as structures of merit or as landmarks, whichever is appropriate. They get put on that list so that they're under the jurisdiction of the Historic Landmarks Commission, and they can, if they ever come in for alterations or demolition, the project would be reviewed by the Historic Landmarks Commission rather than the Architecture Board of Review or the Single Family Design, because they have the expertise to evaluate them, because that board is experts in the historic resources. If you being on that list does sort of keep you on there until they vote it off, or you come in with your EIR and say there's overriding considerations to demolish the building, and that would be your EIR process, mostly after the findings that your consultant made on the buildings. They're in that historic world until you do overriding considerations, or in the MEA that we have, the Master Environmental Assessment has several steps to do before considering demolition, like putting it up for relocation, advertising it to be relocated or relocated on site or out of the site as well. So there's some options before that, and then when you go through all those and you still need to demolish them at that time, you would go for your overriding considerations. And our environmental analyst is here as well, and he works more with the EIRs as well, so he can answer questions you may have there. Do you have any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly what I understood would be the next part of the process.
Thank you, Nicole.
Yes, thank you very much for attending. Any other comments? Do I have a motion to approve this statement and direct me to report it at the Planning Commission?
I so move.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? The item passes. I will be at the commission on September 1st, and basically with a little background, then read this statement. So let's see, that was 5. 6, the Above All Fly Girls.
Yes.
That the recommendation the airport receive a presentation from the Above All Fly Girls on their recent 40th annual Air Classic all-women cross-country airplane race. Yes.
Tonight we have all three of them here. We have Anna Ramirez, is that right? Ramirez? Yes. Joni Steinberg and Terry Harris, and I think this is going to be an interesting presentation. I think the span of knowledge and experience is just unbelievable. So, and what a fun time they must have had. So, Anna, are you going to start, or?
Yeah, I'll start us off. First of all, thank you for having us here at the meeting. We are excited to speak and tell you about our trip.
Quit hiding behind me.
First, we'd like to introduce ourselves. My name's Anna Ramirez. I have about 2 years of flying experience. I started flying at Above All Aviation in the summer or fall of 2014. I got my private license in December of that year, and I've been building time ever since. I also volunteered as an EAA Young Eagle at the San Ynez Airport Day twice in a row, and I'm going to start as a transfer junior at UCSB as an English major.
Excellent. I'm reading about myself. I'm Terry Harris, 30 years CFI. I want to thank Above All Aviation, first of all, who sponsored us by letting us use their aircraft to do this race. And it's been long a bucket list of mine to do it at least once. So I've been teaching and doing pilot services. Dolores remembers me when I was new, on the field for 30 years. So yeah, CFI, ATP, all that stuff. But Joni's the real deal.
Well, I'm the queen. I've got
Joni,
I learned
speak
to
into the
fly
mic.
at this airport in 1953. Did you hear me?
Now we can.
Anyway, I learned to fly in 1953, and I joined the Santa Barbara Flying Club. And we had an Aranca 7AC Champ, and I've been kind of part of Santa Barbara ever since then. And I worked at Stratman Aero Service for, I think, 30 years. And I've been honored to have Above All asked me to be the PIC from the race, and I had the most wonderful crew you can imagine. I mean, they were great. And I would, if I got to go again, I'd hire you back.
So you have some photos you want to?
Yes, we have some photos that we want to share as well. This was our plane. As Terry said, it was generously provided by Above All Aviation, and we thank them for that. It's a 1979 Cessna 182 Slant Quebec. Normally they call it Angry Potato, but we thought she was sweet, so we called her Yams. The approximate ground speed that we got was 135 knots per hour, and that's very approximate. Based on headwinds or tailwinds, we sometimes got faster, but we did end up beating our handicap and ended up with a positive score in the race, so that was great.
Can you explain how that works, the handicap thing?
Sure. So each airplane, because there are different types of airplanes in the race, is assigned a handicap based on a flight flown in a square route where they pretty much take your average ground speed and then they compute it into what your handicap speed is, and that's the speed that you have to beat. So really you're not racing against other people, you're racing against yourself. And the team that beats their handicap on the most legs is the one that would win the race.
Right. I just want to say, we beat our handicap on every single leg except one, just
We did.
saying. Joni, well, I have so many things I would want to share. I mean, you guys must be really
Into the mic.
bored if we're your main attraction. I'm just going this way. But I think one of the best part about this race, two things, was the unlikely friendship between the three of us. And it was the old school and the new school. Anna's, new school, learning with technology, and we all had our iPads. We had a plane with no GPS. And Joni, practically, we almost threw the iPads out the window. And from Joni, we learned to read the cloud shadows, that the best ground speeds to be had if your tail is in the cloud. Don't tell the FAA that. You never heard that from me. But it was it was just a wonderful combination of all of our knowledge and experience. And how did I get there? Because 135 knots. So that's, carry on.
Just as a fun fact, we had over 50 hours of flight time between getting to the race start, completing the race, and then heading all the way back coast to coast. So with that, here's our route. The race started in Prescott, Arizona, and then we had several stops that took us across the country and then up north to Illinois, and then it ended in Daytona Beach. So for us from Santa Barbara, it really was coast to coast, which was really a neat experience. And so that's the days that we completed it. And as you can see at the top there, you have until from June 21st to June 24th to complete the race. And so on the first day, we did 1 and 2 legs, and we were totally wiped out after that. You can see on day 2, we kind of got the hang of it more. We completed 4 legs that day. And then on day 3, kind of took it easy, did 2 legs. And on day 4, we crossed the finish line, which we were really excited about. So these are just some pictures of our team.
So I want to interject that every day, so we had these 10 airports we had to cross timelines over. But if you've never air raced, which I never had, you have to think about all the variables. There's the weather. If we continue, we've got a great tailwind today. If we get one more leg in, we might be glad tomorrow, but there's thunderstorms in the afternoon. And so we had to consider all those things. And every race team had their own discretion. As long as you get there by Friday at 5, there was a lot of variables about how many legs to do in a day. Joni, anything to say about that? 'Cause she was
Well,
the
I
brains
got-
in our
Well, anyway, looking at the ground, I had a hard time getting these girls to look at the ground through the window. Anyway, there's a lot of things on the ground that you can check, and like I say, the previous picture with the
Oh,
the,
go back-
the
go back to
charge,
us.
there it is,
Old school.
old school, but, you know, it came in handy when the old iPad went blank. And, oh, and it gives you.
don't go without paper charts, ever. She's right.
Anyway, we were getting them ready and we made a 100-mile strip along, and those charts were all cut up and everything so we could really lighten up our load. And even coming home, we used our charts. And I don't know, it's just keeping time and keeping yourself on course. The iPad's nice, but I don't know, is it still, you have to have a little bit of the old and a little bit of the new, I think, to make this thing work. So, that's all I got to say for now.
So this was day one, lining up to start the race in Prescott with all the other airplanes.
55?
55
airplanes.
And then 5 additional non-competitive planes. So it's about 60 in total. And these are all the pilots getting started for the day. That's in flight. We're just having a good time. And this was crossing the Ohio River, I think into Kentucky, but don't quote me on that because I'm not that good on geography. But that was going from Illinois down south again. Here's Terry getting comfortable in the back seat.
That was on the way home when the race was
Yeah.
over.
And then this is Daytona, crossing the, what was that called, the inlet, right?
I don't know, the finish
I-
line. This was
Intercoastal
the
Waterway,
I
last
think.
approach to landing.
Yes.
Oh, remember this one?
Marksville, Louisiana.
Yep.
Right, so we landed in on the way home, Marksville, Louisiana. We were always looking for airports that were pretty high in elevation, so we didn't have to give up all that hard, expensive, earned altitude. And we found this airport, we found a hotel, and when we got there, we were the only airplane on the field.
There's a panoramic picture of us,
so
and our plane is just to the right there.
And then you go on Uber and there's no Uber, there's no taxi. So we got somebody to come out and pick us up who was from some other hotel. And they said, oh my gosh, I've never been out here before. People were wonderful. So we actually did manage, we waited by that Jeep for a long time, but we managed to get to somewhere we could sleep.
I'm the boss.
Right, that's Joni supervising us, checking our tire pressure.
I also like to call this one, how many pilots does it take to check tire pressure? Thank you for your time and for having us here. And if there's any questions that you'd like to ask them, we're obviously open to answering those as well.
How many of you are ready to go again next year? Joan, Joan, put your hand.
I just wanna
Where-
mention
where
that
did you
Joni,
place?
This was her 16th time
Yeah.
doing the Air Race
Wonderful.
Classic. However, she's done a lot of other air racing by, other routes.
12.
But yeah, 16.
Where did you place?
Oh, we placed 12th out of 60 teams.
55?
Yeah, 55.
Wow, that's
Wonderful.
great.
And we would have taken home a trophy if we hadn't made a couple boo-boos, which I think out of 55 teams that actually completed, there were 2 engine failures, off-field landings, nobody was hurt, there were people who had to drop out because of technical problems, but everybody's fine. But of the 55, we were the 12th. We did win medals in 2 legs. We got 2nd place in 1 leg and a 4th place in another. But I think only 6 teams out of 55 did not receive any penalties at all. So 8? 8? Oh, thank you for correcting. Anyway, we got, once we got too low, which is a big no-no on the high-speed flyby. Twice we weren't lined up on final
more than, we had to be a mile out, wings level on final approach, so we blew that twice. Those were our big penalties. Otherwise, we really, really did well. We beat all our handicaps.
And I think the interesting thing about that is it's really hard to go out and practice that somewhere else. Flying as fast as you possibly can, down low at 100 feet. It's not something you get a whole lot of opportunity to say, hey, tower, can I try that?
Actually, Santa Barbara Tower were great while we were practicing. And when we came home, we couldn't resist on the final legs. Could we please do a high-speed, low altitude flyby? And then above all was out there, all the mechanics, our supporters to meet us.
And we shall erase the noise monitor tapes for those runs.
One of the things that we did have to take on board was a tracker. We had two of them. The Bad Elf was called one, and Spot the other. And that's why they could nail us if we did an approach wrong or came in too low. They had it all programmed, and we had to carry this thing on board.
Bad Elf, we hated that.
Bad Elf. Anyway, but we didn't have to file flight plans because we had it on board. And because they would know instantly where, we went down. And so that little thing, I think if you sneezed, it would have a little blip on the pod.
All right,
We take any questions, but I just want to say that, as the Airport Commission, this is just a wonderful experience to promote general aviation, women in aviation. In any way that the airport can support this is fabulous. And I hope that one day Santa Barbara will be a stop on this route. I don't know how that happens. Do people volunteer or how it would happen? But one of the highlights for me was every airport we landed at, there were 100 volunteers from the local aviation community. The 99s, the EAA, the whatever, all those organizations, and they would come running out like we were athletes, in the Gold Cup or whatever. Bottles of water, food, come on in, Atlanta, welcome to Atlanta, we got peaches, Georgia peaches, or whatever it was, but it would be wonderful for Santa Barbara to host the air race if it ever comes up. I would say
All
vote
you
for
need
it.
is money.
Oh, you have to pay them? No.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very, very
Thank
much.
you.
I'm very glad you made the presentation. It was great, and I congratulate you all on a wonderful job.
Yeah, congratulations, and it sounds like great fun. Especially the high-speed pass.
Okay, item number 7 is the fiscal 2016 P3 year-end progress report, and the recommendation is that we receive the performance report.
Yes, tonight, Tom Bullers, our admin analyst, will do the presentation for you. Oh, and he's going to be standing up.
Good evening, everybody. Just a brief overview. The P3 program is the City of Santa Barbara's performance management program. It's similar to a lot of other organizations. It's a way to evaluate your organizational effectiveness and plan work on a more long-term basis. And also just kind of align yourself with the broader organizational goals. In particular, the P3 program promotes long-term planning. We looked at a lot of the measures are done on an annual basis. They're updated. For bigger projects, you can kind of break it down into smaller chunks to make sure that you're kind of meeting steps along the way. Each fiscal year, we develop new lists of objectives and update all of them. Progress is monitored on a quarterly basis, and a lot of the results are used even for evaluations of managers and supervisors. So it's kind of a complete process of developing a plan and executing it and seeing how you're doing and checking back in. For fiscal year 2016, which ended June 30th, the airport identified 57 objectives across 8 airport programs. Of those, we achieved 71% of them completed by the end of the fiscal year. 2 of those are not included in that calculation. One is to complete 85% of the objectives, so we didn't think that is fair to include in that calculation. And the other one was related to taxiway EK improvements. That was one of our originally identified AIP projects, but the runway 725 rehab project was determined to be a higher priority project, so that replaced the other project. Just to highlight a few accomplishments, we developed a tentative financial and logistical plan to relocate the FBOs. That'll be modified subsequent and honed subsequent to the adoption of the master plan. We evaluated and adjusted the methodology for utility rates and charges to bring them more in line with the Goleta Water District tiers and charges. Completed some significant repairs at the restaurant facility next door, the High Sierra Grill. Installed a new roof over at Building 223 that is currently leased by Teledyne and subleased by Athena right now. Developed an enhanced online safety training program for our maintenance staff, and that's tied to renewal of their access media. Developed a new notice of violation form and conducted some training sessions with airline terminal employees on building emergency plan procedures. And then finally, our big AIP project for this fiscal year, the Airfield Electrical and Safety Project. These are just a couple of pictures to kind of highlight some of the components of that. On the bottom left, you can see replacement of some of the fencing along the north side of the parallels. You can see the new fence kind of in the foreground, and the old fence is really hard to see, but it's there. And then on the right-hand side, some in-pavement guard lights that are being installed to mitigate one of our hot spots at Taxiway Charlie and runway 15 right, I believe is where that one is. And then a few of the objectives that we did not complete this year. We've had some vacancies in our security group, lessen the amount of checks of AOA and non-AOA patrol points that they get to every day, and the daily site and terminal inspections. The airport master plan, we had to do some additional traffic modeling, so the EIR, as you know, is underway now, so that wasn't adopted, the master plan yet. The Goleta Slough Mouth Management, we're working with the County of Santa Barbara on submitting permit applications. The county is the owner of that property, so they need to be a signatory on those applications. And then our social media awareness, it didn't increase as much as we were hoping that it would. We've hired a social media consultant to help us ramp that up a bit. And then just to place our completion percentage in the context of the broader airport and city, over the last 3 years, we've averaged about 78% of our objectives completed, and in FY15, all the city departments were about 84%. And with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Questions, comments?
Yeah, I think the staff should be congratulated on their achievements of the year. It is very, very sound.
Thank you.
I would certainly echo that and note that the percentage of completion is heavily biased by how aggressive you are in your plans. And I noted in reading through here that overall the planning, the goals and objectives were very, very aggressive. So meeting 78% of extremely aggressive goals is better than meeting 100% of not so aggressive goals. And I would also note that the area in which I think it appears as though there was the greatest failures were in the patrol division, which has been plagued by our salaries and high cost of living, which has resulted in a significant number of vacancies. I strongly suspect that if there had been no vacancies, that would have been 100%. So congratulations to staff, and thank you very much for the report.
Thank you.
Next item we have is the May Terminal Intercept survey results. Sounds very dangerous here. But, we're going to receive a report about the passenger intercept survey.
That's right, and tonight Deanna Zackerson is going to give you the presentation.
Alrighty, good evening, Commissioners. It's my pleasure today to share with you some results from a survey that was conducted in the passenger terminal in May, and a little bit of our thoughts on what they might mean for us moving forward. And it's something that we have done intermittently, but this is a really good time, a good juncture in our air service development efforts to be doing something like this. So an intercept survey is not nearly as violent as it sounds, but it does mean that you actually intercept travelers in the terminal and ask them to fill out a survey. So this particular survey, as I said, was done in May. It was completed as a written survey provided to travelers during the peak travel hours, so basically from 5 o'clock in the morning and through the noon hour. And we had nearly 500 respondents that filled out this survey. We interpret the results somewhat cautiously in the sense that we didn't have a particular sampling plan that would have enabled us to calculate a margin of error. Nonetheless, it was done in a way that we feel confident that we can glean something from these results. Also, we did benchmark these results somewhat with a survey that was similar to this one that was done at John Wayne in Orange County. So we had something that we could reference for reasonableness with these results. The one thing that is sort of interesting and important to point out is that we surveyed people that had already chosen Santa Barbara as their departure point. So there's a little bit of that phrase, preaching to the choir, in the sense that it means that we were interviewing folks that had already made the choice to come to Santa Barbara. So we know something about those folks, though we're limited in that knowledge somewhat because we haven't interviewed or surveyed folks that perhaps make another choice in Santa Barbara and why they make that choice. So that'll be a little bit more clear as we move forward. So first of all, of course you want to ask some basic demographic information, and this is not really all that surprising, even though the bar graph on the left makes it look like there's a big disparity in the genders, there really isn't. Slightly higher on females, but only slightly. And that can be a little bit reflective of, as you'll see in a minute, that we have become primarily a leisure travel airport as opposed to business. So John Wayne, for example, had a little bit of the inverse situation, but they had more business travelers. And age demographic, Santa Barbara travelers, at least in this survey, were a little bit older, skewed a little bit older than what we saw in Orange County, but not significantly. And the younger portion of travelers was about the same. We didn't collect household income information in the survey, and afterwards it could have been useful information for us if we were to correlate that with other data that we have to see sort of what the demographic of the traveler is within the income bracket. But that's something that we can look at in the future. So first I wanted to show you this slide, which may be familiar and relates to the next piece of information. It shows our primary and secondary catchment areas. The middle section there from just north of Santa Maria to just north of Ventura is sort of the primary catchment area, geographically at least, for the Santa Barbara Airport. And then there is a north catchment area, as you can see, and a south catchment area. So that's relevant to us to see what the geographic draw is for the airport. And as you can see here, the greatest number of travelers came from the primary catchment area, and actually quite few from the outside catchment areas. Now, it doesn't necessarily tell us where the greatest market potential is. It just tells us where people are currently coming from. So, and then of course there's a group there, about 38%, that are folks that are basically out-of-state tourists and that kind of thing, so completely outside of the area. We had quite a number of frequent travelers. Typically, a travel frequency around 1 to 3 times a year is pretty much the norm for most people, but you can see there that we had a significant number of folks that travel very frequently through Santa Barbara. This slide is interesting in the sense that we asked travelers, which airlines do you fly frequently? And it's not so strange, perhaps, that the folks we interviewed said, well, the carriers that you have are the ones that we fly frequently with. If we were to ask this question of the general population, we would most certainly get a different picture here, because folks are choosing Santa Barbara and they're choosing these carriers because they go together. If you are a traveler, for example, that has a preference for a carrier that does not serve Santa Barbara, well, there's a good chance that maybe you're choosing a different airport. Alrighty. So as I mentioned before, leisure travel is predominant now in Santa Barbara, and I understand from folks that have been around for a while that this may be attributable to a decrease in frequencies out of Santa Barbara, making business travel a little less practical for some people. So this is basically where you're at today, with over half of your travelers traveling for leisure. As far as how folks are getting to the airport, still predominantly folks are either driving and parking themselves, or they're being dropped off by folks. Particularly in the early morning hours, folks are more prone to drive themselves. And then as the day goes on, more commonly we'll get drop-offs. The interesting thing here, I think that we could see, is that the ride share, even though we hear that the ride share, which includes Uber and Lyft and those kinds of services, that they're nibbling into the taxi market, you can still see here that, at least in this data that we collected, that the taxi numbers are still stronger. But that's something that is obviously evolving over time. All right, and we asked folks how they find information about Santa Barbara Airport, and it seemed that folks interpreted this question somewhat broadly to mean not just information about Santa Barbara Airport, but about travel in general, about their travel plans in general. But interestingly here, we see that most folks are getting information via the internet. That's probably not surprising, but even the first few categories, the internet, airline apps and websites, and different digital types of medium are really becoming the dominant way of finding out information of travel. That's an important lesson for us to take into consideration. Knowledge of the Santa Barbara website was not as good. There's a majority that didn't know about it. It just means that people are getting their information about travel and Santa Barbara from other internet sources than specifically our website. And that is something that, as Tom mentioned earlier, we have a social media effort going on right now that aims to really improve that, get more people to the Santa Barbara website via social media. And then we asked some questions about advertising. The interesting part about advertising, or I think we've all become more aware, it is a very, very crowded marketplace for people's attention these days with advertising. And so in this instance, we actually show here the number of people that either didn't answer the question, and then, of course, those who are not actually sure. Amongst those who did answer the question, it's about 50-50 that they could recall that they'd seen advertising from the airport. Amongst the folks that cited that, yes, they could recall advertising from the airport, most commonly transit, so sides of buses, and internet advertising, which we do have a fair amount of that as well, through NewsHawk and some other arenas. And so we can see that your traditional advertising, perhaps print ads and even radio, are beginning to diminish in importance, at least compared to some of these other means of finding out information. And then transitioning a little bit here into just satisfaction with the traveler experience, we have a high rate of purchase frequency from our airport concessions. And I know compared to other airports, if you can get a 50% conversion of your passengers buying something out of your concessions, that's pretty doggone good. And here you've got over 60%. So this is actually a really good metric for us. And we had a follow-on question here asking people, well, is there something that is missing? Is there something that you would like to see? And we really just didn't get a lot of, people were pretty happy with it. Most people said, nope, it's fine. Maybe additional food, but nobody seems to be really hurting for additional offerings, at least at this point. This was tabulated a little bit differently because of the way the question was asked. There was different attributes, and so in order to sort of avoid confusion with percentages, these are raw numbers. But really the graphic is sort of illustrative here, that we asked people on each of these attributes: convenience, staffing, cleanliness, security, car rental, reliability, concessions, et cetera, to rate Santa Barbara as either excellent, average, or poor. And I think you can see there the proportions of folks that are rating Santa Barbara as excellent is far outpaces anything else. And in comparison to John Wayne Airport that asked a exactly identical question, we were really actually quite pleased that our ratings here looked a lot better. So this was great. Then how folks, or what it is that are motivating folks to choose Santa Barbara Airport. And it's probably not surprising that folks are choosing Santa Barbara Airport because of location and convenience. Those are a little bit, can be one and the same for some folks, but as you can see, it is very strong in convenience and location. And then following that, you pretty much have folks that are coming to Santa Barbara because it is a destination either for tourism or for business. The interesting takeaway from this, though, is that we do know from some of our earlier research work for air service development that, of course, we are losing about every other passenger that we could be claiming to Santa Barbara to another airport, which means that it would be very relevant information for us to have to understand why travelers who could be choosing Santa Barbara because it's the most convenient and closest airport are still choosing a different alternative. And there can be some logical explanations for that, but that would be something that would be important for us to learn for our marketing and our air service development. We asked folks, just like at John Wayne, for a rating on your traditional school grading scale as to how you would rate Santa Barbara. And as you can see here, a flying A grade grading amongst folks. And again, compared to our benchmark airport, we did a lot better in this category. So we can feel pretty happy about that. So some summary results or summary conclusions for us here. We're drawing the most passengers from our primary catchment area, though we don't really know if that is just some portion of even greater potential, or if the flanking areas really do need more attention from an air service development and marketing perspective. And that's something that we would benefit from knowing more about. Again, location and convenience is the greatest motivator, but what is motivating someone to choose a less convenient option? Passengers are seeking travel information via the internet. This is really key for our marketing efforts to really take a hard look at spending precious dollars on where we can reach people most effectively, and really reaching people at that point when they are most likely making a decision about a travel purchase. And since people are booking on the internet, most likely that intersection point is going to be on the internet. We have a high degree of satisfaction with the travel experience at Santa Barbara. So we can feel good about that. We are living up to that promise to the traveler of being the easy come, easy go airport. So how do we tap into that in our communications with the public? So as a general recommendation, we are seeing that this kind of information is very, very helpful to us. And we're looking forward to focusing more on data-driven research and a data-driven approach to our air service development to make us even more effective. So we're doing some other things to sort of build on this and looking at some other opportunities for us to really refine what we know about our potential in the marketplace. So I'm happy to take any questions if you like.
I just would like to commend all of you. The reason I miss a lot of these meetings is because I have to travel for work, and Santa Barbara is one of the most convenient, beautiful, cleanest, and I absolutely agree on the restaurants, because I usually have to take a very early morning flight, and the food is fresh, and the employees are well trained. It's a wonderful thing, trust me.
Any other comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think it's excellent that you're doing this. It is unfortunate that you can't find those poor people who make the wrong decision and fly out of someplace else, but
Well, I think that's our objective, is to find those and win those folks over.
I made the mistake of flying out of LAX once. That was 30 years ago. I won't make that mistake again, so
That's great.
I thank you again very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Deanna.
We have the director's report now.
Yes, I'd like to start off by showing you have little chocolate airplanes at your location. Today is the 5th anniversary of the new airline terminal.
Oh,
August 17th, we opened, which was pretty awesome, actually, way back then. So, and to follow up on that, the passenger count for July, as you probably noticed, was 8.1% increase. That's actually the highest that we've had since March of 2014. So that's really, I think we're on a roll, and we want to reinforce that and keep going. So that's really fun. I wanted to bring to your attention as well the airline terminal solar project. We will be terminating the contract with Sun Edison due to their bankruptcy, but we do have some potential companies that we'll be following up with to see if we can get that project restarted. The NOAA project is complete. The equipment's in, and they should be tuned up and ready to go shortly. Direct relief, as you probably know, we closed on August 5th. So the sale did go through, and we received, after closing cost, about $8,683,000. So we will put that money to good use in building our own light industrial properties. Next month, Tom will be presenting an end-of-year financial report for commission, but just as a note, as of July 31st, the preliminary year-end operating revenues were 2.5% below budget, but our expenditures were 7.7% below our budget. So we're still sort of in the black. So that concludes my comments tonight, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or provide any additional information.
Questions? Thank you very much, and congratulations on the increase in the travel. I presume a good bit of that might be due to the addition of the American to Dallas-Fort Worth, so.
It is indeed, but I think all of our loads are high. I mean, it is summertime as well, but I
Right.
mean, we really, the seats we have, we're filling, and that's
Great.
very important. Yeah.
All right, so we stand adjourned. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.